I didn't walk into work that Monday expecting anything unusual. It was month end, which meant spreadsheets, invoices, vendor confirmations, and the usual pressure from management to wrap things up before close. The only thing on my mind was coffee, and the fact that I'd slept maybe 4 hours the night before. Nothing dramatic, just another day in a job I'd never questioned. But the day had other plans for me, and it began with a folder hitting the break room floor. Our HR manager, Lisa, had her hands full. Plastic plates, flyers for some morale-boosting event, and a stack of onboarding documents she was rushing to file. I offered to help. She tried to juggle everything herself. The inevitable happened. The papers slipped from her grip, scattering everywhere. "Damn it," she muttered, kneeling. I knelt too. It wasn't a heroic gesture, just instinct. I grabbed the nearest sheet to hand it back to her, not thinking much of it, until my eyes landed on the number printed in bold. Sign-on bonus, $40,000. My hand froze. At first my brain tried to reject it. 40,000. A mistake? A different department? Some executive role? But then the name hit me. Ethan McCarthy, Operations Analyst. Operations Analyst. My job. My exact job. Same title, same grade, same responsibilities. My sign-on bonus had been $2,500, before taxes. After taxes, it bought me a pair of shoes and 3 tanks of gas. I didn't say a word. I just placed the paper face down on the stack and kept gathering the rest. My expression must have looked normal enough because Lisa didn't notice anything. "Thanks," she said, smiling quickly. "New hire paperwork always piles up." "Yeah," I managed. "Happens." I walked out before my face showed what my stomach already felt. A heavy sour drop that didn't leave. It wasn't jealousy. It was something colder. Something that had been building without me seeing it. On the way to my desk, my mind kept trying to rationalize the number. Maybe he had a certification I didn't? Maybe he negotiated harder. Maybe corporate had updated compensation bands. But none of those explanations made the image of that bold 40,000 fade. When I reached my desk, Ethan was already there, feet crossed under the chair, an iced latte from the expensive cafe downstairs in hand, scrolling his phone with the boredom of someone who believed the world worked for him. He noticed me watching him and nodded with the kind of confidence that doesn't come from skill, but from assumption. "Mornin', man," he said. "Mornin'." "You know how to do the vendor discrepancy sheet thing?" he asked, already swiveling his chair toward me. "They told me you'd walk me through it." I blinked. The vendor discrepancy sheet was part of his assigned workload. Management had said bringing him in would reduce the team's burden. So far, I'd seen no evidence of that. "I can show you," I said, "but after today, you'll need to handle it." "Sure," he replied, though his tone said not a chance. While he talked, bragging about how the offer came in fast and recruiting said they really needed him, I watched him differently now. Before, he was just a slightly arrogant new hire. Now, he was the $40,000 man, the strategic investment, and I was the guy they paid $2,500 to bring in and forgot about. Around noon, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. The second hit of the day. I was returning from a meeting when I passed the glass hallway near the manager's office. Derek, my manager, was talking to HR. They didn't see me. "He's not going to find out," Derek said. "He never pushes back on anything." HR replied, "Still, the difference is big. If it leaks—" "It won't," Derek cut her off. "He's loyal to a fault." I didn't react. I didn't even stop. I just kept walking like I hadn't heard anything. But inside, something shifted. Loyal. To a fault. That wasn't a compliment. That was a strategy. That was someone describing a tool, predictable, quiet, safe to take advantage of. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at a spreadsheet I'd done 100 times. But it didn't feel like routine anymore. It felt like weight, like a job I'd been carrying alone while others were rewarded for simply showing up. And then, right on cue, Ethan walked over and dropped a stack of printouts beside me. "Huh, hey man, these are yours," he said casually. "They're yours," I corrected without raising my voice. He laughed like it was a cute misunderstanding. No, Derek said you'd take this off my plate while I'm still getting up to speed. I looked at the stack. 30 minutes of work for a seasoned analyst. 2 hours for someone who'd never done it. And now it was mine. Again. I didn't argue. Not yet. But something in my chest tightened. Not anger, not sadness. Something more precise. Awareness. People show you who they think you are. And today my manager showed me exactly who he believed I was. A placeholder. A dependable workhorse. A man too loyal to ever leave. But he was wrong about one thing. People don't leave jobs when they're treated badly. They leave when they finally understand the truth. And I was beginning to understand. Around 6:45 p.m., I was still at my desk, finishing the reconciliation Ethan had been assigned but never touched, when I heard Derek's voice through his half-open door. "He'll never complain," Derek said. "Honestly, that's why I didn't fight harder for him. The guy just takes what you give him." That was it. Not the 40K, not the workload, not the disrespect. It was the certainty in his voice, the certainty that I would swallow anything. I stared at my screen, the numbers blurring. My hands felt steady, strangely steady. A calm I didn't expect spread through me, the kind you get right before you make a decision you've been avoiding for too long. And then a simple thought formed. If this is how they see me, why am I still here? I didn't quit that minute, but the idea solidified like concrete, and somewhere deep inside I already knew. Tonight would not end the way anyone expected. If you've never worked in a place that quietly punishes loyalty, let me explain how it feels. It doesn't happen in one big moment. There's no cartoon villain screaming in your face. It's a series of tiny decisions stacked on your back, one after another, until the weight stops feeling heavy and just feels normal. That Monday night, sitting under the stale office lights, I realized I'd been calling that weight stability. By 7 p.m., most of the floor was dark. The sales team had gone home hours ago. HR was gone. Finance was half empty. It was just a couple of glowing monitors, the cleaning crew's cart, and me. Me and the $40,000 investment who was already packing up. Ethan appeared by my desk, backpack slung over one shoulder like a college student leaving a boring lecture. "Hey, I'm heading out," he said. "I think I've got the basics now. You can send me any templates, right?" He'd spent the last hour complaining about the reporting tool and asking questions I'd already answered twice. "Sure," I replied, still looking at my screen. "I'll email you the templates." "Cool. And, he dropped his voice like we were sharing a secret. "I heard you're the one who keeps this place actually running. Derek said you're his rock." I looked up at him. His rock. Not partner. Not key contributor. Rock, as in, doesn't move, doesn't ask, doesn't change. "Is that what he said?" I asked. Ethan grinned. "Yeah, man. Said you're the kind of guy companies love. Reliable. Doesn't make waves. Doesn't make waves." He left. The cleaning lady, Rosa, passed by and gave me a sympathetic look as she wiped a desk across from me. "Still here?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Month end." "You work too much," she replied in that tone people reserve for warnings they don't expect you to hear. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Apparently, that's what they like about me. I didn't confront Derek that night. I went home, microwaved leftovers, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at my online banking. I pulled up my old offer letter out of curiosity. The PDF was still sitting in the same email folder from 3 years ago. Sign-on bonus, $2,500 gross. Paid within 60 days of start date. No relocation, no equity, no strategic investment language. At the time, I'd been grateful. I was coming out of a smaller company that paid late half the time. This place gave me a badge, a steady paycheck, and a 401k. I told myself that was enough. I scrolled through the next emails, my first performance review, my second, my third. Exceeds expectations in workload ownership. always willing to help others, could advocate for himself more, very dependable, rarely escalates issues. It was all there, in their own words. I shut the laptop and just sat there in the quiet. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was a pattern, and I'd been playing my assigned part perfectly. The next morning, I got in early. I always did. I liked having 30 minutes of peace before the office filled up and people started asking for just a quick favor. At 8:32 a.m., Derek walked in with his usual travel mug and his usual fake urgency. "Morning, Grant," he said, dropping his bag. "I saw the recon file you finished last night. Good stuff. That's why I know I can count on you." There it was again. That word. Count on you. I decided not to wait any longer. "Derek," I said, turning in my chair, "can we talk about compensation for a second?" He hesitated. Not long, but enough for me to see it. "Sure," he replied. "What's up?" "I saw a sign-on bonus yesterday," I said. "For Ethan, same role as mine, same grade. It was $40,000. His face didn't even flicker with surprise. That told me everything. "Comp packages vary," he said smoothly, "based on market conditions, timing, candidate leverage." "I've been here 3 years," I cut in, keeping my voice calm. "I've taken on workload from 2 people who left. I've trained their replacements. I've been told I exceed expectations every review. And my sign-on was $500. Derek sighed, like I'd just made his day harder. "Grant, I get that it doesn't feel fair," he said. "But this is just how things are right now. The market for new talent is different. We had to make a strong offer to bring Ethan in." "And we didn't have to make a strong offer to bring me in?" I asked. "You were in a different situation," he replied. "You were unemployed. You needed stability." There it was. The story he'd written about me. "You're saying I was cheaper because I needed the job more," I said. "I'm saying you saw the value in the opportunity itself." Derek countered. "Look, you've grown a ton here. You have security. You know the systems. You have trust. That counts for something, too." "Does it count for $37,500? I asked. His jaw tensed. "Look," he said, dropping the nice manager tone. "If you're thinking about this the right way, you'll remember your situation. You're not in the same leverage position Ethan was. He had other offers. He could walk. You—" He stopped. Too late. I heard it. All of it. You could walk. You can't. Those were the 8 words, stripped down, that sat behind everything he'd been saying. He could walk. You can't. That's the difference. He didn't say them in that exact sentence, but every syllable pointed there. And in that moment, something inside me went very, very quiet. "Understood," I said finally. "Derek, relax," thinking I'd backed off. "Good. Listen, we can definitely discuss a small adjustment at your next review cycle. I'll see what I can do. But I need you focused right now, okay? Big month. Small adjustment. Next review. See what I can do." I nodded. "Yeah. Big month." He clapped my shoulder like a coach sending a player back onto the field and walked away. He genuinely believed I had no moves. The rest of the day, I did my job. I answered emails, closed out vendor tickets, double-checked reconciliations. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside, the math was different. Every time Ethan walked over to ask another basic question, every time Derek forwarded something to me with, "Can you take this? You're faster." I mentally filed it under a different label. Not helping the team. Not being reliable. Just proof. Proof that they'd built a system that ran on people like me quietly accepting less, so they could throw money at people like Ethan who looked good on a slide. Around 4:30 p.m., Lisa from HR stopped by my desk. "Hey, Grant," she said softly. "Do you have a minute?" I followed her into a small meeting room. She shut the door. "I'm guessing you saw something yesterday you weren't supposed to see," she started. "And I'm also guessing Derek handled that conversation in his own way." That was one way to phrase it. "I saw Ethan's sign-on," I said simply. and I heard part of your conversation in the hall." She winced. "We should have been more careful." "That's one option," I said. "Another is paying people fairly." She didn't argue, which told me she already knew it was wrong. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, "I'm not going to pretend the difference is small. It's not. But a lot of this is above my pay grade. Recruiting, budget approvals, VP sign-off. I don't control that." "I know," I said. "I just need to understand how the company sees me, so I can decide how I see the company." She studied me for a second. "You're considered solid," she said finally. "Trustworthy. Low risk." "Low risk," I repeated, as in unlikely to leave. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We both understood. When I walked out of that room, the irritation wasn't just about money anymore. It was about being classified, filed, under won't do anything. They had misjudged my leverage, they had misjudged my patience, and they had no idea I'd been quietly documenting everything for months. Not because I expected a war, but because I was the kind of person who kept records, the kind of person who saved emails, the kind of person who could prove, line by line, who actually carried what. I just hadn't realized until that day that those habits were going to become my exit plan. And later that night, around 3 a.m., they would find out exactly how wrong they'd been about the man they thought would never walk away. I didn't plan for Tuesday to be the day everything snapped. It started like any other. I came in early, reviewed the reconciliation tasks, checked for discrepancies, drafted a vendor follow-up email, and finished the work Ethan had left undone again. Routine. Predictable. But something in me was different. A quiet awareness that I wasn't operating on their terms anymore. For the first time in 3 years, my loyalty wasn't automatic. It was a switch I could flip off. By noon, the office was buzzing about something else entirely. The quarterly metrics presentation. It was Derek's favorite event. He treated it like a performance review for the entire team, except only his slides mattered. He loved being on stage. He loved taking credit. And he loved being the guy the VP nodded at. But this quarter, almost every number on his slide deck came from me. I built the models. I cleaned the data. I compiled the reconciliations. I prepared the vendor accuracy charts. I fixed the forecasting tool when it broke. I created the exceptions report he was going to show off as his new idea. Ethan contributed nothing to the deck beyond giving Derek a thumbs up and joking about how numbers people scare him. At 2 p.m., Derek called us into the conference room for a dry run. Ethan sat at the far end of the table with a coffee that looked more expensive than my entire breakfast. I sat closer to Derek so I could correct any errors in real time, like always. Derek clicked through the slides with the confidence of a man who believed he'd earned them. "Here you can see our reduction in vendor discrepancies, quarter over quarter." That was my report. "We've improved invoice turnaround times by 14%. My process revision. "And we've implemented a new escalation model." Also mine. I watched him rehearse, polished, steady, comfortable, completely unaware that I'd stopped feeling invested in protecting his performance. About 15 minutes in, he paused at a slide showing our internal error rates. "This is the best work my team has ever done," he said, really proud of how everyone stepped up. Everyone. I waited for him to gesture at me. He didn't. Instead, he turned toward Ethan. "And big shout out to Ethan for jumping in quickly. Strong addition to the team." Ethan shrugged like he was modest, then looked straight at me to see if I caught it. I did. I caught every detail. After the session, people started filing out, and Derek approached me. "Hey, Grant, quick thing." I closed my laptop. "Yeah?" "For tomorrow, can you get me the variance breakdown by site? Leadership may want to drill into distribution centers separately." "That wasn't discussed in scope," I said. "I know, but we need it," he replied, lowering his voice. "Look, the presentation has to run clean. Ethan's still new, so I can't put that on him yet. Just knock it out tonight and send it to me before morning." He said it casually, like asking for salt at dinner. "Tonight?" I repeated. I know it's short notice, but that's why I trust you. Trust. My favorite word that week. I paused long enough for Derek to sense something, and that made him uncomfortable. This is part of being a team player, he added. We all have to stretch. We all? I asked quietly. He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. Not yet. Just get it done, he said, his tone tightening. Please. I nodded and walked out of the room without another word. Back at my desk, I opened the variance files, then minimized them and just stared at the screen. The irritation wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled into something heavy and calm. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done defending myself silently. Done helping people who mistook effort for weakness. Done caring others for the sake of team spirit. Done believing I had no leverage. And then something unexpected happened. While I sat there thinking, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. A compliance archive. I kept it because I liked having clean documentation. Invoices, email threads, escalation chains, timestamp logs. It wasn't meant for revenge. It was just how I worked. But seeing it through new eyes changed everything. There were emails showing I had flagged vendor issues months before Derek escalated them. Emails where Derek had ignored my warnings, then forwarded them to leadership claiming he'd spotted the problem. Timestamp chats proving I had corrected errors Ethan made in his first week. Files showing which metrics I had built manually because the tools were broken. Everything was dated. Everything was clean. Everything was irrefutable. I scrolled through each item slowly, not to plan an attack, but to understand something important. I had been carrying that department for far longer than I realized, and I had the receipts. At 6 p.m., most of the office was empty again. Ethan had left at 4:47. I knew because he announced it loudly. I didn't start the variance report. Instead, I opened Word, created a blank document, typed the date, typed my name, typed a header I had never imagined writing. Resignation letter, effective immediately. Then I stopped. I wasn't ready to send it, not yet. Not until one more thing happened. Because deep inside, I knew Derek still believed I'd comply. He believed I'd stay late. He believed I'd save his presentation. He believed, truly believed, that I couldn't walk. And then, as if on cue, the moment came. At 7:22 p.m., Derek sent me a message. Where are we on that variance report? Need it tonight. No greeting, no gratitude, just entitlement. I stared at the message for a full minute, and in that minute, I realized something simple. This man didn't respect me because I had never required him to. I closed the message without replying. Instead, I opened the compliance folder one more time, went through each file, labeled them clearly, and saved them to an external drive. Nothing secret, nothing malicious. All of it was documented business communication I had every right to store. Then I shut down my computer, packed my bag, turned off my monitor, and walked out. Not fast, not angry, just done. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. There was no yelling, no slammed doors, no speeches. It was a quiet walk through an empty office, the kind you take when you finally see yourself clearly. And at that moment, I knew when I came back tomorrow, everything would change. I just didn't know how far that change would go. Until the moment at 3 a.m. that none of them would ever forget. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious. The opposite, actually. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't buzzing with deadlines, emails, or the next task Derek would throw on my desk. It was quiet, calm, focused. Around 11:45 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook in front of me, the same one I used for project notes. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't plotting sabotage. I was outlining a clean exit, a professional one, a documented one that reflected what I actually was. A man who did things properly, even when walking away. The company had lived off my predictability. They'd taken advantage of it. But that same predictability now worked in my favor. my organization skills, my documentation, my discipline. Everything they underestimated was about to save me and expose them. At 12:30 a.m., I opened my work laptop again, not to work, but to gather proof of my workload distribution. I didn't download anything sensitive. I didn't touch confidential data. All I did was consolidate. Ticket logs of tasks assigned to me. Internal chats where Derek shifted Ethan's duties to my plate. Time-stamped email chains showing I completed work allocated to 2 former analysts. The escalation threads proving Derek ignored warnings I raised. My performance reviews praising my output. And most importantly, the burden distribution sheet HR used internally to track team workload. That last file, that was the one, because according to that sheet, I was carrying 38% of the department's monthly workload. Ethan carried 6%, 6. The rest was scattered across 3 other analysts. The sheet wasn't secret or confidential. It was a standard internal operations file accessible to our whole team. But it told the real story, the one Derek had hidden beneath his team player speeches. When I saved the file to my records folder, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt accuracy, truthfulness, a clean, objective reflection of reality. At 1:47 a.m., I drafted my resignation email, short, precise, professional. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. I set it to send at 3:00 a.m. The exact time didn't matter logically, but symbolically it did. I had spent countless nights staying late for that company, countless evenings fixing problems others created, countless hours holding the line. 3 a.m. felt appropriate, a quiet time for a quiet conclusion. At 2:03 a.m., I printed my resignation letter on my home printer. 1 page, signature at the bottom. I placed it inside a clean envelope. Then I wrote a second document. Not a letter, not a complaint, not a threat. A simple factual timeline of my workload for the past 18 months, with references to internal files. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't argumentative. It was a professional courtesy to HR, a roadmap showing what had really been happening. So when leadership asked, why didn't we see this coming, HR would have the answer. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I wasn't trying to get Derek fired. I was just removing my silence from the equation, and once silence leaves, truth speaks. Around 2:40 a.m., I drove to the office. The parking lot was empty except for the night security guard's sedan. I swiped my badge, nodded at the guard, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. The office looked different at night. Still, unimportant, temporary. My desk lamp illuminated the same workspace I'd sat at hundreds of times. But now it looked small, contained. A place I had outgrown long before I realized it. I placed my resignation letter gently on Derek's chair. Not on his desk, on his chair. The first thing he'd see when he sat down. Then I logged into my computer one last time. At exactly 3 a.m., the scheduled resignation email sent itself. 1 copy to Derek, 1 to HR, 1 to the VP of Operations, 1 to myself for record. I logged out, I shut the laptop, I removed my keycard from its lanyard and placed it beside the mouse. Then I did one last thing. Not revenge, not pettiness, just ethics. I wrote a short message on a sticky note. Variance report not completed due to resignation. Documentation folder in shared drive has everything needed for tomorrow's presentation. Because I wasn't like them. Even leaving, I wasn't going to sabotage a project. I wasn't going to cause chaos. The chaos would come naturally, from the truth they'd ignored. At 3:10 a.m., I walked out of the office for the last time. When the elevator doors closed, the relief hit me so hard I had to hold the railing, not because I doubted myself, because I finally felt a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying fall off all at once. I got home, drank a glass of water, and sat on my bed in the dark. Then I turned off my phone and slept, deeply, for the first time in a long time. The next morning, the world I left behind caught fire. I didn't plan the timing. I didn't orchestrate anything. I just underestimated how quickly truth makes its way through the corporate bloodstream. At 8:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. One voicemail from Derek, one from HR, 3 missed calls from the VP's office. By 8:30, texts started coming in from coworkers. Dude, what happened? You quit? They're scrambling. Ethan looks terrified. Derek is not okay? I didn't respond. Not out of spite, because I wasn't part of that system anymore. At 9:07 a.m., I received one last text from a number I didn't recognize. Your documentation was thorough. Thank you. Operations VP. There was no anger, no threats, no guilt, because I hadn't broken anything. I had simply stopped holding it together. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that within the next 48 hours, everything inside that department would shift. Ethan's workload would finally be inspected. The burden distribution sheet would circulate. Leadership would realize Derek's entire success was built on one person's quiet labor. They would learn who I really was, and who Derek had pretended to be. But that part, that comes soon. And when it hits, it rewrites everyone's story. Because walking out at 3 a.m. wasn't the end. It was the first domino. People think the most satisfying moment in a workplace revenge story is the explosion, the dramatic confrontation, the shouting match, the collapse of the villain in real time. But the real satisfaction, the real closure, it's quiet. It's watching a system built on your silence suddenly face the truth without you lifting a hand. That's what happened the week after I walked out at 3 a.m. The first day without me. I didn't go back to the office, didn't check my work email, didn't answer Derek's messages. I spent my morning at a diner, drinking black coffee and eating eggs while sunlight came through the blinds. It felt surreal, like a life I wasn't allowed to have for years. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, a message from Marissa in accounting. Did you know the VP pulled Derek into a closed-door meeting for like an hour? Ethan looks pale. Then another from Jake. Dude, they opened the shared drive. They saw the workload distribution. I guess no one ever looked at it before. Then, HR asked Ethan to walk them through his tasks. He legit couldn't explain half of them. I didn't smile, not out of modesty, out of recognition. This was exactly what I expected when the truth finally had room to breathe. The second day, the audit. On Wednesday morning, HR emailed me formally. Thank you for the clarity and professionalism of your documentation. It has helped us identify several structural issues in operations. That was corporate language for, we did not know how bad Derek's dependency on you was. Around lunchtime, Marissa sent another text. Operations is under internal audit. They're checking email histories. That made sense. I hadn't deleted anything. Derek had, often. And when leadership compared his claims to time-stamped records, the pattern was clear. He had ignored escalations, shifted workloads, taken credit for my work, and built his performance reviews on the assumption that I would always fill the gaps. The audit simply confirmed it. The third day, the meeting on Thursday at 3:27 p.m., I got a message from Ray in IT, a guy who'd always been decent to me. They confronted Derek, hard. A minute later, VP asked him why the person doing 38% of the workload was paid the least. Then, someone printed the sign-on bonuses comparison. HR confirmed the numbers. Then he tried to blame you for not communicating your concerns. VP shut that down. I reread that line twice. Of course, Derek tried to blame me. People like him always do. They forget that silence isn't consent, it's survival. He's not fired, Ray wrote, but he's removed from team oversight pending review. That was corporate speak for, your days in power are over. I set my phone down and took a long breath. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindictiveness. I felt clarity. The imbalance had corrected itself, and I didn't have to break anything to make it happen. The offer, On Friday morning, I got an email from the VP of Operations, a concise, formal message. Grant, your departure revealed leadership gaps we were not aware of. Your professionalism before, during, and after your resignation has not gone unnoticed. If you are open to a conversation about returning in a senior capacity with adjusted compensation and revised reporting structure, I would like to meet. No pressure, no expectation, only an invitation. VP Operations. For the first time in 3 years, the company was talking to me like I mattered, like I had leverage, like I had value, like I had choices. But that realization came too late for them. I had already chosen myself. I wrote back, "Thank you for the invitation. At this time, I am not interested in returning. I wish the team success moving forward." And that was it. No bitterness, no drama, just a clean line. Where Ethan ended up a week later, Marissa texted, "Ethan's bonus was reviewed. They're clawing back a portion of it. He might not stay." I wasn't surprised. Systems built on shortcuts collapse when the person holding them together walks away. Where Derek ended up 3 weeks after my resignation, Ray sent one last update. Derek was offered a lateral move. No team, no budget control, no presentations. He didn't take it. He quit today. I stared at that message for a long time. Not in celebration, not in shock, just understanding. Leadership roles built on hollow foundations don't last, and Derek's foundation had always been the same thing. My silence. Where I ended up, I didn't rush into a new job. I took 2 weeks off, something I'd never once allowed myself to do while working for Derek. I went hiking, fixed things around my apartment, and slept without an alarm. By the end of the month, I had 3 job offers, all from companies I'd interacted with professionally, all valuing my work ethic and clear documentation. I chose one that paid me fairly, one that treated me like an adult, one where team player didn't mean do everything quietly. I walk into that office now with light shoulders, knowing no one expects me to be invisible. I leave at 5. I sleep well. I don't check emails at night. No one calls me a rock, like it's a synonym for mule. And most importantly, when someone assigns me work, they're assigning it to a man with a voice, not a placeholder with a pulse. The final closure. Sometimes I think back to that folder in the break room, the one that flipped open and changed everything. If I hadn't seen that $40,000 number, maybe I'd still be there, doing the work of 3 people, waiting for someone else to notice. But in a strange way, I'm grateful, not for the disrespect, not for the lies, but for the clarity it forced me to find. People don't leave when they're angry. They leave when they finally see the truth. And walking out at 3 a.m. wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of recognition. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't loyal to a fault. I was a man who finally understood his worth. When I left, the system broke. When the system broke, the truth surfaced. And when the truth surfaced, the people who relied on my silence finally had to live without it. Now, I live quietly, peacefully, on my own terms. And I haven't looked back once.